So my name is Cathy Macharis, and I'm very happy to be here and already to get to know many of you this morning, and already I know quite a lot of people from before. I'm from Brussels, as has been said, Free University of Brussels, in the research group MOBI that I'm leading. And there it's a big group of people working on the transition towards a more sustainable mobility and logistics system. And I've been working on this paper together with these colleagues. And as a frame for what we wanted to do. So when Corona was there, I was quite upset in the sense of things are happening now. Things were quite strict in terms of measures. And if you compare that to what is being done for climate change, well, there was really a complete different reaction on it because it's far away, it's not impacting it on us. We don't see people dying directly from the climate crisis. And so, in a sense, that was quite differently. You also had that generation aspect. For Corona, people were saying to the young people, well, you are not doing enough to save us, while for the climate, it's the opposite, where the young people are saying to us, really, you have to do something. So there were a lot of things playing. And so when COVID came, the question was, of course, how can we use this momentum, this crisis, for a change also in terms of climate? And as we know, in terms of research, in terms of travel behavior research, we also know that people tend to change their travel behavior at very specific moments in their life, when they are moving or when they get a child or when they divorce. And so how can the COVID crisis be also seen as a catalyst for change towards then a more sustainable mobility and logistics system? And so as a structure for the analysis of what was happening during COVID, the previous one. We used the structure that I made for this book I published last year. And it's a book for the broader public, where I explain how we can reach the climate goals. And how can we reach the climate goals is a story of 8 A's. And it's the transition towards a more sustainable mobility system, but it can be seen as a way to reach also transition in other areas like energy and so on. The first step in a transition is awareness. We have to become aware of that something is unsustainable or something is going not in the right way. And so the first step is awareness, and then we can do something about it. It can be avoiding, and that's the first step then, avoid unnecessary kilometers, avoid also, if we talk about consumption and buying something, the first thing is, well, should we really buy this? So avoiding unnecessary impact. So that's first step. If we can't avoid it, well, let's act and shift it towards a more sustainable modes. If we then still have to go by car, let's anticipate new technologies so that the impact is lower. And so these 3 steps, avoid, act and shift, anticipation of new technologies, is really the 3 main measures to be put in place to make systems more sustainable. But then, of course, well, we quite know this, that we have to avoid, shift and anticipate new technologies. But then it's important to also look at actor involvement. We have seen the yellow jackets. We have seen what is happening if we don't involve the different actors. So actor involvement is crucial in this transition. And then how to accelerate the transformation. And that acceleration is about having the right incentives, the right policy frame and the right policy measures in place. And then once we have that, of course, on an individual level, we will also have to alter our behavior. And so I ended that story with do we have all on board, and what is really needed, then how can we then take action? And so for the COVID paper, we looked within that structure on, okay, what are the different quantitative data we know now, what's the impact of the COVID crisis on mobility? And we also did a qualitative newspaper analysis in the local newspapers, because the analysis was focused on Brussels. And we did this in the first stage from March 18, so when the lockdown started in Belgium, until October 22. But then for this paper, we are extending it also, and I already have some new data to the data we have until now. So the first A is awareness, and what's happened during COVID is, of course, that people became aware that they needed more urban space in the sense of being able to walk around, have some fresh air, that people that were living in small apartments, well, they really had a bad time. And so what happened in Brussels is that they created quite a lot of residential areas, which were before really like big crossroads for cars, became now just spaces where people can walk, have recreation, like this park, which was before really, it was still a park, but where a lot of cars would be going on. So these kind of things were created, and so there was much more awareness of, oh, this can also be possible in our city. It can also be something much more livable with better air and without that much congestion. So that was the first step. Then we come to the avoidance part. So avoidance is then in terms of teleworking, because then if we telework and also online gather in terms of meetings, well, we are also again avoiding unnecessary kilometers. And in terms of telework, well, it was really a doubling in the Corona times, doubling. So 40% of the labor people that were working could indeed telework. For many professions, it wasn't possible, but for those where it was possible, it really doubled. And so we can also see that in the traffic numbers. So here is the pre-COVID phase, and it's about the road traffic volume in the tunnels of Brussels. So we use that as the basis to compare. During the strict lockdown, there was clearly very much a decrease. But then during the different other phases of the Corona till now, well, you see that gradually, again, there was more traffic. If we look at that at the ring roads of Brussels, well, you see that in 2019, so the year before Corona, well, there was quite a lot of loss in terms of hours that were just lost in congestion. Well, that was the blue line. In 2020, the Corona year, it was clearly much lower. But now you see that indeed it started increasing. And so in September this year, we again had more congestion than ever before. But of course, it's still very young in order to say, well, is this now a trend that will be continuing? But anyway, what we see is thanks to teleworking, we had a decrease, and of course, other aspects will be adding up. And it's also not something that is out of the blue, that is all these cities looking at how they can become the 15-minute city. Paris is, of course, the example, but you also see it popping up in the policies of other cities. People learned how to find way. In Belgium, it was called, you only can go for essential traveling during the strict lockdown. And so people have to see how they can have access to everything they need in terms of sports, but food and so on, in 15 minutes from their house. And so also that is something in the basic term that you can indeed avoid. And that's another urban and a very important message in terms of mobility. Well, we need to work indeed on these spatial aspects because that's the basis of our mobility pattern. And so using this kind of things, that's also something that was learned during COVID. Then we come to the act and shift. And there, act and shift is, of course, shifting away from road transport to public transport, biking and walking. And there we see in the numbers for biking, so this is again the pre-COVID times. During the strict lockdown, what we saw is that it even decreased the amount of people that biked. In the very beginning, they were afraid, they stayed at home and so on. But then we saw that during the weekends, they started biking, recreational biking, but you see longer and longer that they indeed started to bike also during the week, and it's quite, and that they kept doing that. We are here now in, so these are the data of 2020. We still need the data for 2021. What also happened was public transport, and there, what we there noticed, and that's a decrease, so a shift away from sustainability, is these are the pre-COVID numbers, how much the train capacity was used during the peak hours and the non-peak hours, and then just during the day, the orange numbers. And at this moment, they are at 80% of their capacity. Due to telework and the changes in working habits, they also think they will not recover towards the 100% of before, but they see in this indeed a change. Also for the local public transport operators, the MEVB, they have seen in different phases how it happened. So they really had a drop until 10%. And then what they saw in their Mobib cards is that once people, they went back to the tram, metro, or bus, they kept using it. So it was really being afraid, okay, I go over that anxiety, and then they continue to use it. They're at this moment also around this 80% of reuse of public transport compared to the pre-COVID situation. If we look then at anticipation of new technologies, so this is the use of electric vehicles, the shift that we will be seeing towards electric vehicles. Also here, during COVID, what happened is that people tend to buy less cars, but more electric ones. And you see these numbers for different countries that indeed the purchase of electric cars indeed got an important increase during this COVID year of 2020. And then we come to the Belgian numbers. I didn't put them in. But in the Belgian numbers, you see indeed that you had less purchase of cars. Certainly there was a drop of diesel cars. So again, that awareness of, oh, indeed we have better air quality, and it also has to do with diesel that really came true. And so there is also there the increase of the purchase of electric vehicles. Then we come to actor involvement, which is a very important one in order to get the transition being done. And in order to see, okay, what happened during COVID and were these different actors being heard and so on, we did a thematic analysis in the newspapers. We also checked who was being interviewed and so on, which is often not the citizen, but yeah, a lot of policymakers. But we also noticed, are they speaking positively about the changes or negatively? And so we looked at, are they seeing indeed that these mobility measures that are being taken, are these favorable or not? And did it change in terms of perception? Was it more positive, negatively, or neutral? And we see during this whole COVID period that, well, there were in the beginning some negative points of view. Then it changed because you also had quite a lot of positive ones. And then in the end, there was also yeah, a rebound effect in the sense that all these measures, and the measures that we're taking were these residential areas, but also 40 kilometers of new biking lanes. They were put in place very, very fast. And then, yeah, there was no time for actor involvement. Also at the Brussels Mobility Commission, we were not heard about, oh, they will do this. We were only involved after a while. And so you get also this kind of extra yeah, rebound effect that they really wanted to be involved. And I think even in a crisis, it's important to get these people also on board and get them involved. And so to conclude, I think during this whole COVID crisis, we see that the people became much more aware. There is another way of living possible, and also with that living, another way of traveling around. So that awareness became much higher, and also in terms of livability, air quality, noise in cities. So that's very important. There were very positive aspects in terms of avoidance, teleworking, but also in the sense of more attention towards urban planning and the 15-minute city. You have act and shift. Positive side are the bikers. Negative is public transport, which is still on a lower level. Anticipation of new technology was positive. Actor involvement, yes, in some way, but as it went too fast, they were not able to really be involved, so that's something to look at. Acceleration of the transformation. Well, in Brussels, they did quite well, because indeed they were quite fast in putting extra measures for really accommodating this new demand for better biking lanes, more space to walk. And so they did. And that is also because they had a mobility plan ready, good move. And so they were quite fast in putting things in place. And then the last A is about altering behavior, which is our own behavior. And of course, if you look into the psychology of change, well, it takes some 60 days to really change a behavior. So we're almost at New Year. You will make your resolutions. If you can keep on doing it 66 days, well, you're quite sure you created a new habit. But so 66 days, well, we were not 66 days in a lockdown, not in the strict lockdown, but people have been also experiencing teleworking for a longer time. So it's too early to say, well, will people keep on doing what they've learned? New way of traveling, new way of living and working. So it's too fast. We will have to monitor that, look at new data. But I think what is important now is to keep that momentum of the COVID crisis and to put new measures, new policy measures in place to really stimulate the amount of teleworking, to put that extra in place, to also really to take this wave, in fact. There are very positive aspects of the COVID crisis, and to put the right measures in place to keep that going on. Voilà, that was my story, and these are my co-authors. Thank you very much.